much wanted to do this one together to talk about First Ladies and the military and their own particular roles and programs that they have promoted very wonderfully over the years. And they wanted to do it together because they like doing that, which is so heartening in these troubled times. But before we hear from them, we are going to hear from a member of the military, Captain William B. Reynolds III. Captain Reynolds' family immigrated from Guyana and raised him in a tradition of dedication to service, to public service, and instilled that in him from the time of his birth. And he took it to heart, went to West Point, and then was served, of course, first in Korea and then twice in Iraq. And on the second deployment in Iraq, he was the chief of reconnaissance and sniper employment. And 6 months into that deployment, he was nearly fatally wounded by an improvised explosive device during combat operations in southwest Baghdad. He came back to be treated, was treated for a long time with 26 surgeries, but even during that time, he served in a staff role at the Pentagon as the Deputy Operations Officer to the Joint IED Defeat Organization. Since leaving the military, he has been incredibly accomplished, publishing the book Making It Millennial, a study of how the government can relate better to the younger generation. And he has been the captain of the American team in the Invictus Games, where he met both of our First Ladies, who will soon be talking. He is a cyclist and a track star, despite having lost a leg as a result of his injuries in Iraq. And he is the father of 4 children while doing all of these other things, and is on the boards of Disabled Sports USA, U.S. Military Endurance Sports, and the Positivity Project. So please welcome Captain Reynolds.
Thank you, and good morning. I don't have near the breadth of history that we've been showered with today to share with you, but I'll start by providing a little bit of personal history and my connection with the First Ladies. As you heard from Koki, at a very young age, I dedicated my life to service, and I made that dedication not only because I was a first-generation immigrant, as a way to repay the debt to the American dream my family was able to live, but also because of the need to uphold and preserve those principles for the underserved. Therefore, I started serving first through church and scouting, and ultimately in the military. However, just a few years into my professional military service, as you heard, I was wounded in combat on a second deployment. What I had come to know as my new identity with service was instantly ripped away from me. For a while, I thought although I would make a relatively successful recovery in my rehabilitation process, my ability to serve was over. However, that was naive thinking at the ripe age of 24. Through visits at then Walter Reed Army Medical Center to my hospital bed back in 2004 and 2005 by then Senator Obama, President Bush, and Senator Kerry, I was continually thanked for my service and for inspiring them and the rest of the American people. It was then I realized that my mission of serving had changed from the Army infantry mission of closing with and destroying the enemy to closing with and inspiring the friendlies. To that end, I'm thankful to the families of First Lady Michelle Obama and Mrs. Bush for motivating me and allowing me to make that pivot to the way in which I served. It is because of that motivation I now have created and served on the board for Veteran Matters, Poverty Outreach, and Character Development for Youth, and furthermore, consult for military health and veteran health. I never knew the breadth of service that could be done in the civilian, public, and corporate sectors, and to the community at large. But if there are three individuals who embody the full gamut of what is possible, these three individuals I'm introducing are it. From raising successful families to contributing to successful campaigns, and ultimately utilizing the office of the First Lady to bring to light the important matters of social change, the First Ladies have done so much to the preservation and advancement of American culture. Most parents in the room would say that parenting is our most important job, and I know that also rings true with the First Ladies. We have seen firsthand the great job that they have done in raising their daughters in the public eye and also to serve. And in the midst of all this, they have been very giving of their time. In fact, the First Lady gave up her Mother's Day to inspire the 500 internationally wounded, ill, and injured service members of the Invictus Games this year down in Orlando, which we were all grateful for. At that very same event, not only were former President Bush and former First Lady Bush in attendance, but also Jenna Bush in her new career as a correspondent and journalist. We're all waiting with bated breath to see how Sasha and Malia serve. Bob Woodruff has also done the same thing through delivering firsthand accounts of combat during Operation Iraqi Freedom, which educated the American people on my former identification with service. And as you know, Bob's service of combat journalism ended the same way mine did, further intertwining how Bob and I pivoted and continue to serve. Not only have I been a benefactor of the Bob Woodruff Foundation at events like the Disabled American Veterans Winter Sports Clinic and also the Invictus Games, which Bob has been a part of, but I have seen the strides in research in the realms of mental health and traumatic brain injury that organizations like the Bob Woodruff Foundation have been able to inspire. For all of these individuals, public service is not only a personal cause that they work tirelessly in both their personal and professional lives and in philanthropic areas, but it's also a family affair. They have all motivated how I raise my young family today, as I'm sure they've done for the entire American and world population. Without further ado, I introduce First Lady Michelle Obama, Mrs. Laura Bush, and Bob Woodruff.
Thank you very much, Will. Thank you, Will.
Well, what an honor it is to be here today. I have a chance. First of all, I want to tell both of you my wife, who is also my commander.
As it should be.
She wanted to say hi to both of you and what you're doing for so many, for the veterans out there. I also want to mention I just had the chance to, and I had a chance to see President Bush out the Invictus Games, where it was such a clear indication that how absolutely committed that he is to this. Certainly, Will Reynolds, who is an amazing person who is out there, I think, winning everything. And he had a chance to talk to. I had a chance to talk to President Bush about what he's doing. President Obama, too, of course, he is deeply committed to this. It's interesting. I just talked to Mrs. Obama backstage here that I had a chance to see him in Laos, and one of the topics there, of course, was what he thought about Vietnam and the war there, and Laos, of course, too. We've got a lot of undetonated bombs that are still in the ground there, and I asked him, all of those veterans. We looked at the time. He and I were born in August 1961, so he's two weeks older than me. We asked about that, what was going on, and we looked at wars so differently back in the 1960s and the 1970s because there were drafts, and certainly we were not attacked on our turf leading into that war. And I said, those veterans that did serve there in Laos and Vietnam, do you call them heroes? And he said, absolutely, we call them heroes. This is not something reserved just for the more recent wars with voluntary wars. But, there. In my experience here, which, as Will said, one we never really expected, having been wounded in the wars, we've experienced a lot of not diminishing attention, but now that the wars really came to an end-ish, as I say, there's not as much attention that's that's being given to those that served in the country. And I'd love to hear from you what it's like to be in the White House, to have that kind of power and influence on an issue that is extremely important.
Well, I would say for sure one thing is worry. You know, you worry in the White House is when you know that there are troops in harm's way, and you think about them every single night when you get in bed. And there, where you're in the lap of luxury, really beautiful house where your sheets are changed every single day. I mean, it's really couldn't be more luxurious. And you think when you get in bed about our troops are laying out on the ground somewhere. And so I would say that the main thing about having troops in harm's way when you live there is that you worry about them all the time, every single day.
Well, and just, you know, we've had the honor and the experience to visit our wounded at Walter Reed and many military hospitals, and that is a sobering experience. I mean, one of the things that Barack and I have talked about is that when we first came into office the first term, our visits would last for hours because there would be 25, 50, 75 folks that we'd be seeing going room to room, many with devastating injuries. And now today, just last week, he went to visit and he was there for 30 minutes because there are fewer of our men and women who are being injured in war. And that feels good. I mean, that's something that a commander-in-chief thinks about before they pop off about going to war. Because when you've spent time on a base and you know these men and women and you know their families, you don't just talk about war like there are no implications. It's serious business, and lives are changed forever. So I would hope that any commander-in-chief that would have the privilege of serving would understand that these are real lives and real families that are impacted.
When there is a story that does come out of somebody or maybe a large group, there's significant injuries in the war. Is it long conversations that you have with the president, with your husband when, that night?
After visiting at Walter Reed or whatever, yeah, sure. I mean, we would talk about them and think about those families. In many cases, the families were there with them, around them. There's one injured warrior that I know of who now we still see who had such a severe head injury.
He was at the Invictus Games.
We didn't think we would ever see him again, that would be it. And he's one of the warriors that George has painted. And he painted him with this scar in his head that he has still, but with his little child on his lap. Because what a lot of warriors will say is that their families are what saw them through. One couple that George painted, he painted him, a portrait of him, but he painted his wife with him. Because this man said his wife was always there, always with him. And he had also suffered a head injury where he needed the help that she could give him. He's doing great now. But George didn't just do his portrait by himself, but painted her in it because he credited her with his recovery.
Bob, I just want meeting our service members, spending time on military bases fundamentally changes who you are as a civilian. And I know that was true for me because when I was like most Americans. I had limited connection to the military community. And it wasn't until Barack's campaign in 2008 that I started meeting military spouses and hearing their voices that you don't hear in regular conversation. We talked about all the challenges that working mothers had, financial worries, worrying about raising your kids. But with these women, mostly, there were the worries of multiple deployments. Understanding that these families are moving their kids every 2 years in service of their country, worrying about whether there are adequate special ed programs in the schools they're moving to. And doing all of this with a grace and a pride that would that blew me away. And that's one of the reasons why I am such an advocate for this community. I wish every American had an opportunity to sit down, to go to a base, to meet with families, to meet with service members, to sit down with our veterans, because we would think differently about our challenges as individuals. Let me tell you, it makes me inspired to work harder, because I think, as Laura said, here we are sitting in the White House. We have no reason to complain when we have 1% of our country serving and sacrificing for the rights and freedoms for the rest of us. So that has just been a profound opportunity for me, and one of the reasons why I will always champion these men and women and their families as long as I can breathe.
You know, it's interesting that I would like to talk about children too, because both of you had the chance to have your kids live with you there in the White House, and both of you during times of war. You know, I should mention also real quickly that I didn't hear the full introduction, but Will Reynolds also has 4 kids. And he's gone through what he's gone, and it gives you a certain amount of different perspective on things if you do have a child who's in the midst of something significant. And I would say most times moving, emotional, maybe even difficult. But during these times, for both of you, what was it like when you had kids there when this was happening, and knowing very well that the commander-in-chief was the one ultimately responsible for this, and probably you're the first ones that they turned to?
Well, I think back, Barbara and Jenna were freshmen in college when we moved to the White House, so they didn't live there. They'd been there, of course, so much.
They were
when their
invited to come.
grandparents, yeah, they were invited to come. But they'd been there as 7-year-olds when their grandparents moved there, so they knew the White House just like we did because they visited them so often. But when I wrote my book and looked back through my schedule, I saw that right after September 11th, the weekend after September 11th, that Barbara and Jenna came home to the White House. And I knew that they came home because they wanted to be with their dad. And they wanted to be with us. And they felt great insecurity, really, off at the University of Texas and off at Yale, freshmen, after the attacks, and they wanted to be there with him. And then I noticed that a month or a month and a half after that, our childhood friends from Midland, Texas came. And I knew that those boys, men that we knew as boys, wanted to be with George, that they just wanted to be there with him. And I think that is really, no one talked about war. That wasn't the conversation. The conversation was, we just want to be with you. And I think that's really important, and I think that's the way the children are too. They don't want to, you don't want them to be worried about decisions their father makes. You want them to just feel the security and love that every parent wants their children to feel.
You just want home to be home.
Yeah.
And you want that for the president because they need that refuge with all that they handle over the course of a day. You want them to come up on that elevator, come onto the second floor. When they open those doors to the residence, they can breathe. They don't need kids hammering them with, Dad, why don't you do this? And sometimes Malia and Sasha will do that. It's like, every now and then at dinner, it's like, what were you thinking? But for the most part, home is home. And that helps keep kids normal. I've said this time and again, my greatest concern coming into the White House was making sure my girls came out whole and normal and decent and kind, just like I would expect them to if we were living on the south side of Chicago. And it takes work to keep White House life normal for the kids.
It isn't normal.
It's not normal. We
Not
pretend.
when you can have a slumber party with 30 friends.
Oh, my goodness. And you try to pretend like it's normal. It's like, yeah, just ignore the guys with the guns, I remember one parent-teacher conference at the lower school, and Barack went, and there were SWAT guys on top of the roof of the school, and Malia was like, Dad, really? Really? Do they really have to be up there? And it's like, yeah, honey, they do. Let's just keep walking. Just keep going. Just keep going.
But they've got to put up with that for even after they leave. There's going to be security.
Well, the security chain, it's different for, it's a different level. So, we don't want to, talk about it too much, but it's not the same as what it will be for the president and the former president and the former first lady. So, and they're all singing, you know, hey, we're out of here, and we get to ditch our agents pretty soon. But it's a different level of security.
I'm really hoping that my 4 kids actually get back to normal too when I leave ABC News. Is that going to happen too? But you know, after I was hit, though, I had to tell my little kids. I said, "All right, there's a new rule. I'm not going to go cover wars anymore." So now I'm over in Asia reporting. So I said, "Well, I can at least maybe do stories about conflict. Conflict's not war." You know, we spoke about the. Both of you have accomplished so much. Military Service Initiative, of course, which was yours, Mrs. Bush, and of course joining forces that you worked on as well. And both of you have worked together, I think, better than most. I mean, I think somebody said that you should tell the husbands to behave themselves compared to the others. But what have you accomplished? More or less than you expected in terms of what you're doing for those veterans? And when I talk about veterans, I'm not just talking about that were wounded in the wars. About 25% are considered to have been wounded. The rest have gone out with transitions when they come back, some to a new civilian world. But what have you done for them that's the most important, and is it more than you expected, or less?
Well, I think in general that there's just a feeling that people support the military, and that it starts at the top. And it's very different, as you said, from Vietnam. When my generation, when they came home from war and were spit upon. And that's not the way it is now. And I think that's really great. I hope that our returning veterans really feel the gratefulness and the support of the American public. And I know that, Ben, you know this too, Bob, you're talking about it, the thousands of veteran support groups little mom and pop groups that have sprung up all over the United States because people do want to support our returning vets. And the other thing we should look at is what an asset they are. There have been 2.5 million post 9/11 vets, and I think about another million will be transitioning out in the next year or so. And think of the asset that is for our country. These people who chose to serve, who volunteered to serve, and now they want to come home. And it's up to us, the rest of us, to figure out how we can help them keep serving in our communities and make a life for themselves that they're happy with, and deal with the trauma that a lot of them have, the trauma of war.
The thing I've been most pleased about with joining forces is that it's really been a call to partnership with all sectors, corporate sector, with our faith communities, with our schools, our educators, our medical community. And what we have seen is that when you ask, people step up without hesitation. You know, and that's the power of our platforms, is that a lot of times if Laura or I ask for help, people are very receptive. The business community has created millions of jobs for our veterans and our military spouses because of an ask that we made. Millions of jobs, helping them get the training and to be able to retain those jobs and to advance within those jobs. And the same is true for military spouses as well. We've been pleased with our local leaders who have answered the call to end veterans' homelessness, which was part of our call with joining forces. The notion that we have even one single veteran living on the streets should be, just considered a travesty to all of us. Well, there are many mayors, some governors, some states who have essentially eliminated veterans' homelessness because they've answered that call. The Hollywood community has stepped up. We've worked closely with writers and producers who've helped to develop plot lines that involve our military families, our military community, because part of integrating those stories into everyday life helps to normalize these men and women and their families and familiarize the rest of the civilian community with those issues in sort of a sort of preachy way. So I've just been pleased.
And you've done your entertaining as well.
I would,
I
you
think it was
know,
what two
try
days
to do
ago
my
you were in
part.
Ellen
Well,
DeGeneres.
we
weren't
weren't
you?
talking about
at
veterans.
CVS.
I don't know what she was doing, but
What is the purpose of that? To do that? I mean, you've been on television shows. You've been on,
well, usually when we do an appearance, Ellen, you sort of try to make things fun because my motto is you get people to laugh and then you can get them to listen. And what
that
we
is
did-
mandatory with her. Yes.
Yeah, and with most Americans, I think people respond differently when there's a little humor. And people feel like you're making yourself vulnerable. Then you seem less like the First Lady and more like a neighbor, a friend. But what we were able to do on her show was really to highlight a number of initiatives, including the work we've been doing with healthy eating and the work that Steph Curry has been doing. We had Bradley Cooper on to highlight 22 Kill. Bradley Cooper, for example, has been a tremendous support around the issue of military health for our veterans and our service members. And Bradley's kind of cute, and he's a little distracting, but if you stop and listen to what he said on Ellen,
I have to say,
he was promoting the importance of ensuring that the suicide rates among our military members is reduced. And in order to do something about it, you have to know that it's a problem. So, people are watching Ellen. They're not always watching the nightly news. I'm sorry.
except ABC, of course.
Except
Right.
ABC, of course.
Just want to make sure you knew that.
But our view is we got to reach people where they are. And
humor
to tell these
works. I
stories.
know we've seen this before. Those nobody wants to talk seriously all the time. For those that have been hit, humor's a great one. My wife always tells me I got rocks in my head, which kind of technically is the case.
You had those before, right?
Yeah, no. that-
When did? Well, I'm just speaking for her.
Oh, you
What I would
spoke to her, did you?
imagine
That is correct. And that's, of course, I used my aphasia to, when she asked me to go clean the garage, I said, what is a garage? I don't even know what that is, but that works extremely well. So much has been done, too. I know that in our experience that early when the wars began, well more than a decade ago, is we concentrate on those that come back on recovering to get out of the hospital and to get the best treatment that they can. But also, the next step was to figure out a way to let them get back into their civilian world when they return to their community. And then, of course, the next one was jobs. And I think that the number, this may be right, is that I think that the rate of unemployment with the veterans now is lower than the civilian numbers, the rate for unemployment. And the other one, Mrs. Bush, was that I know this is one of your concentrations too, which is exactly what we've been learning over time, which is I think most of the attention was largely to those that were visibly wounded. And now we have to realize there's a lot that are invisible. And why is it that you